Hello everyone, thank you for clicking on this video. My name is Max, and today we are going to be talking about Wonder Woman 1984 and my review of the film. Alright, so Wonder Woman 1984 is a film that I really have been anticipating for a long time because I absolutely loved the first film. I loved the kind of darker undertones with the hopeful meaning that it showed. And I was really excited to see what this film would bring to us, especially since the trailers seemed like a completely different tonal shift from the first film. And it was. I kind of go back and forth. There were things with this movie that I really, really enjoyed, and there were other things that were so not what I was hoping to see. Some of the things that I enjoyed, number one, Pedro Pascal. I just finished The Mandalorian, so I'm kind of new to his acting. I hadn't seen him in Game of Thrones or anything, but the way that he portrays his characters, you can tell he really dives into the roles. And the character of Maxwell Lord, I think it's really the emotion that Pedro Pascal brings to roles really sealed the deal for me with him as a villain, because you see his motives, you see directly where he starts to lose it, but you never lose any aspect of the character. And I think that's what really makes him, personally to me, one of the best comic book movie villains we've gotten in a long time, because he is this unique character that has really, he's not a bad person, but he gets consumed in power. And of course, we've seen that before with villains. But I think what really kind of, made this situation unique was how he was doing everything for his son. So he became the villain of the story by trying to provide a better life for his son, and also to prove to his son that he's not a loser. And in the end, he ends up, fixing everything and taking back his wish for his son. And so I think that was a really great dynamic in the story, because it brought him down on a human level and made us connect with him really well. And that gets me into something that I actually enjoyed, but I've heard a lot of people complain about, is how the final battle was not really like a huge, cinematic action scene, but it was more of a I've heard some people describe it as a speech. I wouldn't call it a speech, but more of a like talking some sense into Maxwell Lord on Wonder Woman's part. And I get the criticism of people, being disappointed that there wasn't a big action sequence, but I almost think the way that the suspense was built up for the scene, because, as we saw, there were nuclear weapons appearing and firing, and, it would have been pretty much the end of the world. But Diana talking to Maxwell Lord on a personal level, I think, is what made it work so well, because we see he's a very human villain. He really shows his emotion and his passion, whether good or bad. So I think connecting with him on the level that she did made him realize that he needed to fix what he was doing. So that's why I think it worked so well, because if you look at the character throughout the movie, he's really driven by emotion and his son. So Wonder Woman taps into his emotions to make him realize that in order to save his son, he needs to kind of undo everything he did. So I think that worked really, really well. And I was not disappointed that there was not a big action scene involving Pedro Pascal's character, Maxwell Lord. But when it comes to Cheetah, first of all, the storyline for Cheetah was good at first. We saw her kind of getting hit on and harassed, and she was kind of the nerdy, dorky character like we've seen before with characters like Jim Carrey's Riddler. And it was really working in the first, I want to say 5 or 10 minutes we saw that character on screen. We saw, Cheetah connecting to Diana, Gal Gadot. They really played off of each other well. But as the character progressed in the movie, I started to kind of question what the motive was, because, you know, she ends up wanting to be the top predator, however she puts it, and that explains her cheetah transformation. But there's a scene when they're in the White House that really kind of lost me, because she goes from someone who wants to be able to really stand up for herself and kind of not be pushed around, which I think is a good character motive, similar to the motive for Maxwell Lord. You know, he's just trying to prove himself. But where it kind of lost it for me with Cheetah was how there was humanity in the character until the White House scene, and then it was just this kind of power-hungry sensation that the character took on. So I think, you know, they tried to play it off as she lost the good thing about her, because the way that it kind of works is when you make the wish, you lose, you know, what makes you, or what's most meaningful to you. And yeah, the quality that was said to have kind of make her who she is was her like humanity and kindness, something along those lines. And so they took that away, and I think they went a little too far, because we lost who the character was. And it was almost like a 180 flip from going from someone who wants to be respected and understood to someone who just kind of wants to destroy for the sake of destruction. And I get what they were going for, but I feel like it could have been executed a little better. And something else that I think I really struggled with in this film was the way that it played out, because there were scenes that were so good. Like, again, I keep praising Pedro Pascal, but, you know, he really, whenever he was on screen, I was paying attention to the character because I cared about the character. And with the character of Cheetah, and then kind of going into the next section of the review with Steve Trevor and his return, there was no connection there. And that's kind of my biggest problem with the return of Steve Trevor is, you know, we get shown how Diana is kind of, you know, still mourning for him, 40 years later. And, you know, it kind of, you know, I honestly thought that was a little weird, because, you know, it had been a long time and they didn't know each other for that long. But I think it kind of makes sense when you think about the world she comes from, and then the world that she was brought into with him, and him kind of being the central focus of her life. So I think that makes sense. But when it comes to his return, he's brought back in another guy's body. And I'm sure you've seen the talk about it online, how it is heavily hinted towards that Diana and the guy who Steve took over the body of became intimate. And there are some very questionable things that come up with that. It didn't hit me initially when I saw the movie until the end, because I didn't think it was someone that Steve kind of took over the body of. I thought he was manifested in this other person. But then seeing at the end how it was an actual guy that Steve Soul, or however you want to look at it, took over the body of, really was just weird and kind of ruined the whole film for me in respect to how it was done, because I looked at it initially as Diana could have Steve back, but not fully as Steve, because he died. And I thought that was a cool dynamic to play off of. But then the ending scene with the guy showing up, you know, ruined any sense of, I guess, sadness or emotion I had for Diana and everything that went on. And I think it could have, like, the thing that bugged me the most about the Steve Trevor situation is how he is kind of manifested in this other person's body. Yet all of these things are being created out of nowhere. Like, there's a scene where a leader of some country or some oil person that Maxwell Lord is talking to, and then he eventually, says he wants peace, and then this huge dividing wall appears out of nowhere, and then nuclear weapons are appearing out of nowhere. People are wishing for. There's a scene where a guy wishes for this woman to drop dead, and she drops dead. It's like if anything can really happen with these wishes, then why was Steve Trevor not brought back as Steve Trevor? It makes little to no sense, and it really kind of gets to me because I also think it would have been a lot more emotional for Diana to get Steve back as Steve, as she knew him exactly, his body, his emotions, who he was, everything about him, just Steve Trevor returns. And then to have to lose him, I think that would have had so much more gravity to the story, and also really made the kind of make Diana face the fact that Steve cannot come back, and that she did lose him. So I think that would have made a much bigger connection with the story, and it really did not sit well with me after viewing the film. Something else I thought was a little problematic, shall we say, was the special effects in the film. There were some scenes where it was done really well. Like I think the scene where Diana and Steve are flying through the fireworks in the airplane, I think that was done incredibly well. The perspective of everything was done beautifully, and there were shots like that which really brought you into the story. And then there were shots that really took you out of the story, like where Diana is running after those military vehicles that Maxwell Lord is in. And, she's running and it looks weightless. It looks like a kind of mix of a green screen perspective with, it did not flow at all. It didn't look realistic. And then there's another scene after Diana lets Steve go where she's running, and the running, it looks weird when you just watch the movie, but when you slow it down, you can see her feet are not touching the ground. So it's like, obviously it was not something they either felt needed to, they needed to put a lot of work into, or they just didn't care. But with the amount of delays this film had, they easily could have gone in and polished up a few of these things, because I think it was delayed for maybe 6 months from when it was going to be released, with everything going on in the world right now. But there were certain special effects that really took me out of the story. And then, much like with the fireworks one, there were certain special effects that really brought me into the story. So it was a mixed bag when it came to those. But overall, I think what really affected this movie for me was the kind of plot holes in the general storyline and the motivations of certain characters. So all in all, I think it's difficult to say, because I personally did not mind the tone shift in the way that it was portrayed on the screen, but I disliked the way the tone shifted with kind of not fleshing out characters or situations. But yeah, definitely my favorite thing about this film was Pedro Pascal. He absolutely killed it. I also really like the way that the idea of the wishes were brought through in the story. While I didn't like how certain aspects of them were fleshed out, I think the way that the wishes kind of drove the story forward throughout the entire film was done super well. And yeah, that's about it. So I think overall I would give this movie at highest a 6 out of 10. But I'm wanting to say more like 5.5 out of 10, just because certain things like the special effects. So that's about all I have for now. Thank you for checking out the video. If you like it, please like, comment, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.